Hey everyone, welcome to the Game Dev One-on-One podcast. I am your host, Glenn, and today I am joined by Zach Northrop. Zach, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me. Super excited to chat.
Yeah, me too. So, what I'd like to do today is sketch out your whole journey as a game developer and highlight some of the moments that taught you the most. Perhaps we can also talk about some of the struggles you faced and how you dealt with them. You're also at a very interesting point in your career where you're working on a game called Worming from Home that's getting a lot of attention right now, and it might become your first big hit as an independent developer. And as I understand it, you haven't even been doing game dev for that long professionally, right?
Yeah. I graduated college about 2 years ago now.
Wow,
Only a
okay.
couple of years. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So before we get into all that, I want to take it back to the beginning and talk about what you were like as a kid and see if there were perhaps like early signs that you were on your way to becoming a game developer. Is that okay?
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Um, so yeah, before anyone knew you as a game developer, what were you like as a kid?
Yeah. I think I was definitely trying to be the funny kid growing up. That was a lot of my personality was my sense of humor. And then I would also just say I was kind of all over the place. I think I was the type of kid that every week I had a different thing that I was really into or obsessed with, and yeah, that was just kind of a big part of my personality was just different things every day. Yeah.
Okay, and like what were one of those things that you were especially obsessed with? Like, can you give me maybe an example?
I think when I was really young, it was all of the kind of classic things. I had my like, oh, I wanted to be an astronaut for a week. Oh, I wanted to go, do all of these crazy things. And then I think in high school it settled into a couple of bigger things. I had like a really long neuroscience phase where that was what I
Mm.
was really into, and I wanted to go into neuroscience. Um, so things like that were just like all over the board. I would just see some video or read some book about something, and I would be like, oh yeah, this is my personality now.
Were games a huge part of your childhood, or that did that come later?
Yeah, I never thought that they were I never felt like that was a huge part of my personality, but I think looking back, it absolutely was. That like
Mm.
all of my free time, that was just my entertainment, was either playing games or watching YouTubers play games and stuff. I played a bunch of games with my brother growing up. A lot of Little Big Planet and Skate and like all of those types of games. So yeah, that was definitely a big part of growing up. But again, it um wasn't ever a huge personality thing for me, I think.
Okay, okay. And would you say like you more artistic or like technical, maybe even musical?
Mm.
Like what was specifically enticing to you?
Yeah, I think, practically speaking, definitely musical.
Mm.
That was my way in. I grew up playing drums, and then in high school I started writing some music, and that was kind of how I got into games, was just
Mm.
doing some music and some sound for some friends. But I do think beyond that, I thought of myself as more generally artistic. Like I valued art a lot, and like one of the things with the little neuroscience phase and stuff, I was really
Mm.
interested in like what art does with the brain. And so there were kind of
Okay.
signs early that I think it was always kind of coming back towards something artistic. Yeah.
Right, right. And like were people around you maybe encouraging that? Like maybe your parents?
Yeah, for sure. My parents were super supportive of all of this. And that is, with all of the obsessions and stuff, I give them total credit. They did a really good job just kind of following me on some of those and, supporting me with it. But yeah, they really supported me with the music, especially. my dad is, works in the music industry. And so he was a really big, like, taking my brother and I to concerts growing up and getting us
Okay, yeah.
excited about music and about art. And I think my parents, they were really open about kind of different career paths and stuff. I didn't have any, um, I didn't have any of the like, oh, you need to go be a lawyer, or you need to go be a doctor or whatever. Like, I would kind of come to them and be like, "Oh, this is what I'm going to do," and they were like, "Yeah, cool, sounds good. You should
Okay.
try to get better at that." But um, yeah, so they were definitely supportive. And then I think different friends at different times. I think in terms of games, like I spent a lot of time growing up playing games with friends and like
Right.
playing whatever you do as a kid, Call of Duty with your friends, split screen, and all of that kind of stuff. So I definitely, yeah, I had a lot of support with a lot of those things. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. So let's maybe transition now into like your first steps into making games.
Mm,
And how did you first get interested into actually developing games instead of just playing them?
mm. Yeah, it was kind of two things happening right around the same time. I think it was like my sophomore year of high school when I was like, what I would have been like 15. Um, One of the things was a friend recommended me play the Beginner's Guide.
Mm,
I'm not sure if
yeah,
you're familiar, but
yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, that game. I mean, it kind of kind of blew my mind a little bit, just about like, I had all of these things about like, oh, I care about art and emotion and kind of all of those types of things, and I separately really like to play games, and I think that's fun. And then playing that game was really, I think, just opened my eyes to like, oh, games are an artistic medium, and like you can get that same
Yeah.
kind of artistic expression out of that. Um, so that was one thing that I think kind of started opening me up to that
Mm,
idea. And then the other thing was I just had a friend in my like, sophomore math class, named Gage, who, um, crazy side note, now works at
mhm.
Riot, on Valorant, which is pretty unbelievable. Um,
Okay.
but yeah, we would just sit in the back of math class and talk about games and what it's like and stuff. And he was a programmer, so was like kind of starting to mess around with Unity and do that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
And he was the one who was like, "Oh, we should do a game jam. We should try it. You can do the music. I'll program it, like all of that kind of stuff." And then yeah, that was kind of how we got going.
Okay, okay. And then after high school, did you then actually start did you go to college and study game design or did you go to a different path initially?
Yeah, so for college, I did end up going to USC to study game design specifically, which was definitely surprising. I applied to a bunch of schools um, for neuroscience and other things, and I was also very, obviously into music at the time and stuff. So I was
Mm,
exploring that path, and I just applied to USC because I thought the application was fun, and they were asking all these questions about games, and I was like, oh, this is fun to write about. Um, and then yeah, I got in, which was super cool. And yeah, so I went to school for it and studied. That was yeah, I graduated in 2024.
right, right. And like what was your time in college like? Because I imagine like learned a lot, I imagine, about game design, developing games. Was there a specific part of game development that you really got into during college?
Yeah, I mean, I think I definitely came in as like a music audio person. I think that was
Okay, yeah,
definitely
yeah,
definitely the niche coming in. Um, but over time, I mean, everybody who goes through that program has to take um, a bunch of design classes and general things. Like the first thing
yeah.
you do is make a bunch of board games.
Oh, cool.
So yeah, I mean, I was pretty immediately opened up to more general game design. I started enjoying programming pretty quickly after I got there as well.
Mm,
So um, I think, yeah, it ended up being much more broadening for me than it was like specializing into anything specific, which I think with the kind of dev I'm doing now
mm.
was really helpful. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you maybe remember like your first attempt at making a game, or maybe a game that the first game you actually ever finished?
Yeah, so in high school with that friend of mine, we we found another friend who was going to do some art, and we did a it was a dream hack game jam. I think it was all online and
Mm,
stuff.
okay.
And the theme was apocalypse, and we made a game called Shopocalypse. Where, yeah, you are going into a grocery store in a zombie apocalypse and have to grab a bunch of items and kill a bunch of zombies, and it's like this top down game, and it was super wacky. Just didn't like I'm surprised because it runs and you can play it. Like that was the shocking thing, but yeah, it was a
I
fun one.
imagine like doing one of those game jams that taught you a lot as well, like making a game from start to finish. Um, yeah,
Yeah.
like what was that like, that process for you?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it was interesting. Like throughout high school game jams, I really gravitated towards game jams.
Mm,
I think in large part because, I would try to do like, oh, I'm going to go do a month long project. I'm going to go do something else. And it would just always lose steam. I would get to
mm,
the tough part of dev where something's not working. And then I was like, man, I'm going to school. I'm taking all these classes. Like I don't have the energy for this. Whereas I think game jams were really nice because it was just so compressed, and it was also kind of so much pressure. Like when you have your friends who are like, counting on you to like make
yeah.
music for this thing or like do the thing that you said you're going to do, like it
Mm,
was a lot easier for me to then push through the parts that I hated about it and actually get to the end. But I just love those game jams. I think it was, especially as we did more of them and got better at them over time and kind of figured out the size of thing that we can make in that period of time. It just got more and more fun. I really love them. I still love doing them when I can. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. No, that's what I hear a lot. That game jams are very valuable when you're
Mm.
starting out, and that even when you're experienced, you should still do them, and it's just fun, I hear. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it is such a, I mean, yeah, if anybody ever asks how to start out, that's where I'm like, that is the best way because it just forces you to like make something. you know,
Right.
it's so easy to try to set off and make something yourself and end up with nothing. And
Mhm.
you might end up with garbage out of a game jam, but it will exist, and
Yeah.
that's the important part. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
And so, okay, you went to college, and then what year did you graduate?
Yeah, that was
2024, right?
2024. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And because I think like you have a website, right? Because I went
Mhm.
through it to kind of see like, okay, what you're about and what you've done in the past.
Mm.
And you also did like internships. Maybe it's also interesting to talk about that more and to see what that was like for you.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. So, the two main ones, I had a design internship the summer after my freshman year of college. Um, when I was like 18, it was pretty wild. It was with a tiny little indie company in LA called
Mm.
Airstrafe Interactive. They made a game called uh, oh geez, am I really gonna forget it? I guess I am. It's
Was
been
it
a while and they've
was
changed
it
the name.
maybe Entropy?
No,
Was
that
that?
was one of the jam ones.
Oh, right. Okay.
Hold on, give me 2 seconds. I can tell you. Sailblazers. Thank you. They
Right.
changed the
Yeah.
name
Yeah.
since I was
Yeah.
there. Yeah. Um, and yeah, it was just this absolutely wild idea for a game. It was a combination of a million different genres, and that was really great for me because it was just I hadn't done much design work before that, and it was just an excuse to like poke around with economy design, character design, progression,
Mm,
systems, like level design. I kind of did a little bit of all of it, which was perfect for me at the time. So that was really great. And then going into my senior year of college, I interned at Epic, um, and that was doing some like educational design work on basically using their tools to make example games in Fortnite, and using Unreal Editor, Fortnite, all of that stuff. Um, and that was that was just nice to have a little bit of a AAA experience and kind
Yeah,
of
I
see what
mean,
that is. Yeah.
it's a huge company. You worked on like the biggest game basically on the planet.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite nice to be able to say, like, technically speaking. I mean,
Yeah,
I was doing work in kind of the back corner of it, but yeah, technically,
still.
yeah. But that was really cool. And then I think the best part of that, I was able to um, come out of that with like a pretty loose, flexible contract to keep doing some of the same design work, which has been really helpful for the past couple of years since.
Is that what you did right after college? You were able to go back to Epic and do contract work?
Yeah, yeah, that was the biggest thing I was doing between the end of school and when I started on this project, and through a lot of this project, I've still been doing it kind of on the side and stuff, because it's very flexible, and
Okay, yeah.
it fits into my schedule really well. I've been able to kind of do it on weekends, do it on the side, and have some extra income, which has just been such a godsend. I mean, it's obviously hard to find work like that nowadays. So I'm really grateful for it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And when you graduated, did you have an idea of what you wanted to do at that point? Like, were you thinking, I'm gonna become an indie developer? I'm gonna try and join a triple A development studio?
I kind of had no idea. you know, I was at the time was I mean, I kind of coming out of school just wanted to like travel around a little bit and take a
Mm,
second to
yeah,
like let things settle after school. I think things, I mean, obviously in school doing all of these big projects and having a ton of classes and stuff, I kind of needed a second to um, catch myself. And that was, another nice thing with the Epic contract was that I could kind of do that from wherever. So,
right. Okay, yeah,
um,
yeah, yeah.
and I was applying to jobs and looking into things. I was kind of just assuming that the path would be like, okay, I'm just gonna apply to jobs, and then at some point, hopefully, I can get a full time thing, and like that will define the
Mm,
next stage of my life. But yeah, I wasn't. I mean, I absolutely wanted to do indie. I think that's kind of always the dream with games, but it's hard to be like, I'm gonna go do that now. That's a hard thing to like plan on in any meaningful way, I guess.
mhm. So I'm curious, like, how did worming from home begin? Because it does sound like that's kind of what happened. Like, you started a project, and now you're working on this as an indie developer.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was definitely kind of happened in stages. I think that it literally started. I was in London at the time, and with a friend of mine there who I'd worked with a bunch in college, and talking to him about projects, and I realized, I hadn't worked on like my own project
Mhm.
really since college. I'd done like a jam here or there, but like it had been a little while since I'd had kind of my own thing to be working on. Um, and I was just we were talking about how because I guess for context, we our senior year, we spent a year doing like a kind of unofficial thesis about art games and kind of this
Mm, okay.
pretty, serious. We had a lot of philosophical ideas about the things we were making, and it was a lot of talking through things and writing papers about things and stuff like that. And yeah, our conversation then was like, man, I just need to do something fun. I needed to do something
Mm.
stupid. It's been a long time since I've just made something like dumb for the hell of it. So I just tried to come up with the stupidest idea I could, and I had thought worms were funny in the past, and I was like, all right, worm, and what's the worm doing? He's working a job, sure. And then I was like, that's actually kind of funny,
Yeah,
you know?
okay. So the worm came first, and that's how everything else, like, that's how all
Yeah,
the other elements joined the project.
yeah, I would say. I mean, it was definitely just kind of the combo of the two of just like,
Hmm.
you know, get a worm, put him in a situation. But yeah, I mean, I had thought worms were interesting and funny before. I made like an animation halfway through college just with a worm doing stuff. So the ideas were simmering, I guess, in
Right.
retrospect. Mm.
Yeah, and because that's interesting. Because did it then kind of start more as a joke, or were you in the beginning like, this is going to be like my first big indie game that I'm going to develop, or you didn't have any plans to work on it maybe for long?
No, I mean, yeah, starting off, how I described it to people was like I needed a palate cleanser project that was just like I need to go
Right.
off. I was planning on a month, maybe 2 months. I would maybe put it on Steam or Itch, or maybe I wouldn't. Maybe I wouldn't finish it. We'll see. I just needed something that was like I'm gonna mess around with this um and see. And then here I am a year and a
Yeah.
half after that.
Because
Yeah.
when did you start working on it? Was it like soon after college, or?
It would have been about 6 months after college that
Okay, yeah,
that
wow.
I like started. So yeah, that was like November of 2024. Right around then was when I kind of first had the idea.
Right, right. Okay. So how did you go then from like this silly idea, I'm probably just going to work on it for a couple of weeks, maybe a couple of months, to where you are now, like
Yeah.
almost 2 years later?
Yeah, I think it was definitely gradual of just like, slowly kind of extending out what it's going to be. That again, at first it was I'm spending a month or two on this, and then I made a little prototype, showed it to some friends, and people thought it was really funny. Talking to people about the idea, people kept having ideas and adding on to it and all of that kind of stuff. And I think I quickly realized, I was like, oh, this is way easier to make than anything
Mm,
I've ever made before. Like, I guess, not easy in like, oh, it's just so simple or whatever, but it was just like more natural. I wasn't having to like fight for ideas and having to like,
mm.
you know, go around in circles like I think I did on so many projects. It just kind of felt like,
Yeah.
oh, people are interested in this. I kind of know what's funny about it, and I can keep doing that. And then yeah, so it was just like, okay, some people play it. Now I have some more ideas. Now I'm like, oh, I think it might take, 5 or 6 months to finish it instead of two. Like, maybe I am actually going to plan on putting it on Steam, all of this stuff. And then, um, I get another prototype done, and I'm like,
Hmm.
oh, I think the ideal version of this game is actually a bit bigger and a bit broader. And then I just kind of keep doing this. And
Yeah, okay. So it was like a
yeah.
very gradual thing. Was there maybe like a specific moment that you remember where you thought, okay, now it's really worth pursuing? Maybe a certain mechanic that you added, or a certain idea that came to you that kind of made it a well-rounded game, not just like a gimmick, not just a joke game?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the biggest things, like kind of one of the biggest moments that took it from like, oh, this is the joke, to like, oh, this is kind of actually a, a real project, like a real game that I'm making, was yeah, I guess for context again, before it was what it is now, it was going to be a series of like designed levels that would just be like, you have tasks, you have a pretty linear order of tasks that you have to complete. You have to open this app, send this message to your boss, make a cup of coffee, do whatever. And it was supposed to be like pretty this and this and this. And then after a while, a friend tried it and was like, this would be really would work a lot better if it was like kind of a sandbox simulation. You're earning money, all of this kind of
Yeah.
stuff. And I was like, I guess, but that's going to take so long. And then I spent like another month just kind of like working on things, and it was just so clear that it was like, oh, this should be a more open game. It's you're doing the finance thing. It makes so much sense for it to like have an economy and kind of
Mhm.
lean into the capitalist thing and like the tasks and kind of opening up the system. So I think that transition definitely took it from like, oh, this is my small little project that I'm going to finish, to like, oh, I can kind of see how this would function as like a bigger, fuller game. Yeah.
Yeah. And like once it started to feel more real, like you said, like a real project,
Hmm.
what were the most like important creative principles then guiding you as you developed it?
Mm. I mean, I think one of the things that was definitely there from the start, that well, I guess first of all, when you say creative principles, is it more on the like kind of design pillars, like what are the things
Yeah.
in the design, or just like how am I making it, or
No,
like
like yeah,
process? Like,
design pillars and
oh, okay.
design foundations and like the
Hmm.
sort of boundaries that you were maybe setting up, like this is what it can be, this is what it shouldn't be.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, then I think yeah, one of the things that was there from the start that just got way more formal, I think, when I started taking it more seriously, was that like the core of the game is taking the worm and putting the worm in a mundane situation, like goofy thing next to boring thing. And like that
Mhm.
is kind of where all of the humor in the game comes from, is just like putting those things next to one another. Um, so I think, yeah, that very quickly became a big part of how I was designing things. Was when in doubt, I'm just trying to make a normal working from home office simulator.
Mhm.
Um, and then it's funny because there's a worm doing it. And so like that was one of the early things. And I think that has kept things pretty constrained in a good way. That's helped us say no to a lot of things that I think would have been like wacky and goofy, but like wouldn't have fit the actual kind of comedic tone of it, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and like it is, would you describe it as a comedy game?
Yeah,
Or
I would.
yeah, because my question then, because
Mm.
comedy in games is it's very difficult to sustain. One of the best examples that I can come up with is like the Stanley Parable. Like that is
Yeah.
very much like a comedy game, and it's always trying to find ways to make the player laugh, basically by the narration. So how did you approach this problem of sustaining the comedy?
Yeah, I think we were kind of approaching it from both sides. That I think one way that we were approaching it was just knowing that like this can't be a long game. Like we're not going to make 10 hours of comedy gameplay. Like that's just not on the table. Um, the worst thing we could do is overstay our welcome with this. Which I think is still a little bit of a concern, that is something we're dialing in, is like, okay, how long can we actually meaningfully sustain the
Mhm.
comedy in the context of something that's actually interesting for people to play? Um, so I think the limiting the upper end is definitely a big part of it, and then I think, yeah, the other side of it is trying to make sure that there's some actual real game systems that are there, so that when we don't have a joke lined up or something, like people are bridged pretty naturally to like, oh, there's actual actions that you're taking and you have actual goals that you're trying to complete. And um like a lot of the comedy is situational around like, oh, it's funny that a worm is doing this, but
Mhm.
then there's a lot of the game that is like, okay, you get used to the fact that you're a worm doing these things, and like now it's a game and you do the things. You actually
Yeah.
like go and complete the quests and have your objectives and all of that kind of stuff. Um and then I mean, with a comedy game, there will always be some amount of just like, we just need to put content in. We just need to put a bunch of funny
Mhm.
things in the game, that give people, um, that give it that identity throughout.
Right. Yeah. 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 Before we move on, I think it's interesting to ask. You're working on the game, but you also say that we are working on the game. Who is your team? Who's helping you make the game?
Yeah, so right now it is just me and my best friend Mason, who's also working on the
Okay.
game. It's
Cool.
just two of us. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So there's two on the team.
Hmm.
Okay. Yeah. Going back to the comedy aspect of it. Because you talked about, yeah, now we have to fill the game with like funny ideas or mechanics, make it into a real game.
Hmm.
Were there any ideas that were like tempting to add, but would have maybe diluted the premise of the game or what the game actually is?
Mm. I For sure. I think it's one of the. I mean, it's one of the kind of double edged sword things with the game that, I think in talking to people about it, it's very natural for people to be like coming up with a lot of their own ideas and like adding things, which is really fun and one of the reasons I really like making it, but also just makes it like there's a lot of things for us to be sorting through.
Mm,
I think one thing that I try to avoid as much as possible that we've had a lot of ideas on is like lore and establishing a lot of these kind of fundamental questions about the game of, because people are always like, how did the worm get here? How did the worm get this job? Why is the
yeah.
worm in a human bedroom? Like all of those things. And it's very tempting to establish some kind of like, oh, there's some hints to like, oh, there used to be a human here, but now they're not, like blah blah blah, all of this kind of stuff. But I think we figured out very early that part of the fun of making this is just not answering any of those questions, and just being like that's part of the absurdity of it that we find so fun, is just
Yeah.
like, I don't know how the world, like, yeah, I mean, the worm got this job somehow. The worm, like, there's, I don't know if we have this joke in the game anywhere right now. I think I might have cut it because it made some of the dialogue too long. But we had jokes about how the worm like has an MBA, and the worm, just like little tweaks about like
Right. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
just the absurdity of it. So yeah, that is one thing broadly that we're like, we don't want to we don't want to answer any of this. People can
Okay.
come up with their own ideas, but yeah.
Yeah, because one question that I have, like, does do the worm's colleagues know that he's a worm? Like, are there any Zoom meetings where like the worm doesn't have his camera on?
Yeah, I mean, so we actually went back and forth on this, because for a while the whole goal of the game was like, don't get found out, um,
Oh, right,
and
right.
then I just thought it was really funny if everybody does know and they're just nonchalant about it. Um,
He's
so we
doing
did
our work.
that. No, exactly. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
just like, and yeah, and nobody says anything, um, which I do think was funny, but it was a lot harder. Like everybody just assumes that it is like you're secretly a worm. So that was one that we just kind of were like, I think it's a much clearer premise, and it's much more straightforward to bring to people if it is like nobody knows. But the way we've done that comedically, the way we've tried
Mhm,
to approach it is the whole like the funny part of that is like, how is it possible that nobody knows?
mhm.
Like, the end of the game is going to be as you mentioned, a Zoom call. That's going to be like a one-on-one video call with your boss to like it's like a promotion interview.
Oh, cool.
Um, And it's just like you're so obviously a worm. Like you're a worm, like pulling framed photos of like a stock image of a guy in front of a webcam and using like a Microsoft Sam soundboard to like say things and stuff. So it's like so obvious, but the joke is that then your boss is just like, oh wow, very very interesting. You're so like well versed in these finance things. Yes.
Yeah, the thing about like jokes in general is that
Mm,
they could be funny in the beginning, but then after a while it kind of stops being funny and then you start to wonder, well, is the joke actually funny?
mm,
Were there any moments during development where you had a joke, but then you figured like, oh, maybe it's not good in the long run? And not because you mentioned like you cut some dialogue,
mm.
but were there any bigger things like mechanics or other things that took more time that you felt like, okay, we have to cut this because it's actually not that funny?
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think of specific examples. I mean, for the most part, I would say we've been really deliberate with adding things in slowly so that we haven't had to do too much cutting, which has
Okay, yeah.
been really nice. Because yeah, I've worked on a lot of games where we spend, you know, 4 months on something and then it's like, oh, it's just not good. We didn't test it, So we've done a lot more like, okay, we're gonna make a super easy to make version of this and check it and
Okay,
test it
okay,
with
yeah.
people, see how it does. But um, yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, I don't know. I don't think I have any. I mean, the dialogue has been a big thing. I mean, I know
Okay,
that's
yeah.
not like an entire mechanic, but there's a lot of things that I'm like, write a bunch of stuff that I think is really funny, and then I watch players skip through it entirely because it's way too long, and I'm like, okay, got it.
Mhm.
So yeah.
Before you started showing the game maybe to more and more people, like doing beta testing, were you ever worried that people might just see it as a gimmick?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's a part of me that's still worried about that. I think it's I I think over time I've learned to not shy away from that too much and just kind of be clear about the goals that we have for the project on our own side because we've definitely gotten a lot of criticism that's like, oh, this is just a stupid idea. This isn't going to be fun to play. Like all of those things.
Mm,
And I'm like, I understand looking at the game and that being the conclusion that you come to. Um, I think most of the people who say things like that are not our target audience, also.
right.
So I'm kind of keeping that in mind, which is like our target audience tends to be people who see an idea like this and they're like, sure, that sounds fun. I don't know. Um, and are a lot more open to it. So um, yeah, it's we're aware of it, but we're just
Mm,
trying to back it up as much as we can.
yeah.
Like that's one of the pieces of feedback that I like hearing the most is people
Mm,
being like, "Oh, I wanted to try this because it just seemed funny, but it's like actually fun to play. Like I
yeah, like
actually
there's an
want to."
actual game here.
Yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, and a lot of what makes the game immediately appealing, at least to me, seems to be like how you control the worm.
Hmm.
Um, like what was important to you about how the worm actually feels to control?
It was definitely a long process to even figure that out. Yeah, I think it we knew it needed to be a balance between like awkward. It has to be awkward to kind of fit into this visually weird, funny, like you really have to figure out how it works and stuff. But
Mm,
I think we also, early on, I just decided that I didn't want to make it into like a rage game. I didn't want to make it
like
like
co-op or like
co-op.
maybe
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, yeah,
yeah, exactly.
exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
That was there was definitely a direction that I could have gone with it, where it
Mm,
is just like this is impossible to control. But I think I just wanted to make it so that like it's impossible to control at the very start, and then after a sec you like kind of get used to it and it actually becomes like a functional character controller, and then we can actually extend the comedy out to be more than just like, look at this jiggly worm in a game, that's funny. Like now we actually, the worm can do things in the world, and like we can have interesting interactions and have funny moments that come more from the premise than just like, oh, funny worm controller.
Okay, and did it take a while also with like testing to get the movement just right and it not feeling like you said like maybe too awkward? Um, did that take that took a while I assume to figure out?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, there were a number of things with it that were like, I just like I was trying to find references for how to make something like this, and it was hard to find. You know,
Yeah.
it's like there's not many controllers that work like this, like character controllers, and
Mhm.
so yeah, it took a long time. I think one of the toughest things was figuring out how a worm is supposed to press a button on a keyboard. That was like, I was literally like making diagrams and trying to figure out like, oh, how do you do this thing, and um, all of this stuff around. Yeah, it just took a while to figure out like, oh, we can actually get the worm to like the worm is holding up its head all the time, and then it could point its head downwards and press downwards. And then I mean another massive thing with it is the camera, that was just like
Yeah, I that must have
kind of
been
a
a nightmare.
yeah, kind of a nightmare.
Yeah.
It's it's fine. I wish it was better, and I'm continuing to like mess with it to try to get it to be better, because there are just a lot of limitations with it. Um, but at a certain point, there is some amount of like, how else are you going to do this with the worm? You know, I'm trying to lean into um, the conventions with a third person controller as much as possible, while also knowing that like this is a hard one. You know, the
Mm,
worm is very low to the ground in all of this and is often trying to look up at things, which is
mm,
hard to get a camera to orbit down into the right spot without clipping into things, without it being possible to clip into the worm, all of this
yeah.
stuff. So that's been a struggle. Yeah.
Yeah. And how did you sort of like balance, I guess, the realism of being a worm, having this remote job, but then also adding things like being able to lift weights as a worm? Because that's like you have realism, but then the absurdity of okay, now the worm can lift weights.
Yeah, it's definitely. I mean, yeah, on the point about like, oh, the funny thing is the worm, and then everything else is mundane. That's not entirely true, because we definitely have things like that do kind of just like come out of nowhere. And I think that's the general approach, is just to try to make sure that those things are specific, and there's not too many of them, and they're not too overwhelming. Because I think a lot of it would fall apart if like everything was like that, and like everything was this weird surprising thing. But I think we're trying to hit the balance of, you establish a base of, oh, this is, everything is pretty normal and you're a
Mm,
worm, and that's the surprising part. And then from there you can say, oh yeah, you buy a weight and now the worm can like lift weights, and it's like a kind of new surprise that I think works comedically, because at that point like you're used to the fact that you're a worm, so like we can start kind of reintroducing more surprises like that.
yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Cool. So you work across design, programming, and audio.
Hmm.
Um, how does thinking about audio affected the way that you are making worming from home? Because I feel like you kind of specifically have a passion for audio.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, it's kind of weird on this project, I'll to be honest. Like I think on previous projects I am such an audio snob, and like have all of these thoughts about how things need to be and all of these like adaptive music systems that I think will make things smoother and all of that. And I feel like I'm kind of sinning on this game a little bit because like I think I just realized early on, like, if I try to make audio a centerpiece for this, like it's
Mhm.
probably gonna make things worse. Like
Right.
this is a visual, like it's a very visual game.
Mhm.
And and I think especially looking at references and stuff, um, audio has a lot of leeway to just be um goofy and kind of out there and not actually all that realistic and just kind of there to provide feedback when you need feedback, make a joke when you need to make a joke, um, and things like that. Rather than, I think I normally treat audio as way more of like a core aspect of designing the game,
Mhm.
which yeah, I do believe is generally the right way to do it. But like on a game like this, it was I just learned like I mean, I get more compliments on the audio in this game than I did on games where I like worked really, really hard on the audio,
Okay.
which is also a little frustrating. But you know, I
Yeah.
think it just yeah, we just figured out how it's supposed to fit into the broader context. You know.
Right, right. Because I was gonna ask, like, how do you know when wearing too many hats is helping you versus hurting you? But it seems like you kind of have it figured out with working from home that you
Mm.
already realized if I make audio or try to make that a core thing, it's gonna hurt the game and the premise of the game. So it seems like you have it
Yeah,
figured out.
yeah. I mean, I think yeah, obviously working, doing the whole, working in every single part of the game is the classic indie thing. And I think yeah, prioritization is a big thing with that, and just saying like, this is the important part, this is less important. Um, yeah.
Okay. I'd like to talk a bit more with your collaboration with Mason. How how is that going, that process? How are you dividing the responsibilities?
Yeah, I mean, it's been so nice. I mean, I cannot say enough nice things about him in general. He is so in terms of dividing responsibilities, he's doing all of the art, I'm doing all of the things that are not art. For the most part, it's pretty cut and dry with that. I mean, we
Okay.
do we are clear about like, I want him to also be like designing things and contributing to the game, and like, he's not like sitting there doing his tasks and then going away or whatever. Like, we talk about the game a ton, and he is a very close collaborator on that. But in terms of like, delineation of tangible responsibilities, it is
Mm,
very much just like art, not art, which is really nice. We're not ever really stepping on each other's toes, which is great.
okay. And so he is actually making all the 3D models, and then you're the one that's inserting them into the engine environment and then just
Yeah,
making everything work?
yeah, for the most part.
Okay.
I mean, he does implement a lot of his own things, but I'm doing a lot of setting up physics and
Yeah.
tuning things and the more mechanical side. Yeah.
Yeah. And, like, what was the moment where you saw, like, okay, this visual direction with Mason's help is really elevating the whole game and making it click?
Mhm. I mean, it was almost immediate. Like, and I mean, we like he's again a really close friend of mine, so we'd been talking about the project for a while before he formally started working on it. So it was really quick once he was like, "Oh yeah, I'd be happy to work on this." Like, there wasn't much actual onboarding or anything. And one of the first things he did was, he took a screenshot of the game and did a paint over for um, what he thought the style should be.
Mm, yeah.
And it was just, I mean, because the style before that point was entirely designed around the limitations that I have as an artist, and it was very much just like, I don't really know how to model things very well. So like, I guess it's going to be a low poly style then. Like, that's
Yeah.
what that means. Um, and I think, yeah, having him on the project just opened it up entirely. It was like, oh, now we can actually do. I mean, I think the more realistic style is way more common in simulation games,
Mm,
and like Goat Simulator and
yeah,
I Am
yeah, yeah.
Bread and like all of those kind of references too. So like it actually allowed us to situate ourselves in relation to those, which yeah, it was so nice. I mean, seeing the worm, because one of the first actual assets he made was new version of the worm,
Mm.
and I was losing my mind when I saw it, because it was just before it was just like a pink cylinder basically, and then he put
Yep.
it in and I was like, oh my god, that's just a worm. That's like an
Yeah,
actual worm. So yeah, it,
yeah,
it it makes the jokes land a lot more, I think, when it's just like, oh my god, yeah, it's just like yeah, real worm.
yeah, yeah. I think I definitely agree with a game like this. The more realistic just helps sell this really goofy premise.
Mm, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So now I'd really like to talk to you about what it was like putting the first demo out on
Mm.
Steam. Because I'm also wondering, was there any traction before you put out the demo? Like, how did people notice you first?
I mean, honestly, not that much. Very, very early on in the game, like before Mason was doing anything, I posted like one or two things on Reddit that
Mm,
got some attention. But it was pretty marginal. That was just one thing of people being like, "Oh, this is funny," "This is interesting," and I was like, "Oh, cool," that helps me be interested in continuing to make this, to know that like it might have some legs in terms of being able to share it. But yeah, I mean, it was really not much until we started putting the demo out there, and then things changed very quickly. Yeah.
yeah. How how did you get all that attention? Because I think right now you're sitting at least 25K wish lists on Steam. So
Yeah.
how did or were streamers maybe playing the demo, or were news articles being published about the game?
It was kind of a bunch of things at the same time, because um basically in January, we were at that point we were basically sitting on a finished demo that like it was in a really
Mm,
good spot. We had just shown the game at Magfest, which was super helpful to just like, it had been really stress tested. We knew that it worked, and we were deciding whether we had a non-funded publishing deal on the table at the time, um,
mm,
which I had been on and off looking for publishers for kind of the entire production, mostly just because I was like, I really don't want to market this game. I really don't want to, deal with all of the not game dev things. Um,
really? Okay, so you never really planned to try and make it into something bigger than it could be?
I I planned to do it if I had to, I would
Mm,
say, but I didn't want to. And I think I didn't think I could as well.
oh,
Like, I think before launching the demo, and before things got more public, I really felt like marketing was some like black box
right.
magical thing that some people know how to do and other people don't. So like I really wanted, and I mean also it just takes a lot of time. So I wanted
Yeah,
somebody to like be able to help us with that. But yeah, so
sure.
in January we were trying to figure that out, and then we ended up saying no and just wanting to kind of stay independent and try to do it ourselves. And then right when we made that call, we announced the game,
Mhm.
um, and then launched the demo a week later, which was
Wow,
um,
okay.
yeah, pretty crazy. I mean, the only reason was that we didn't want to launch a demo during February because of Next Fest. And we just knew that it would be swamped with things. So our
Yeah.
solution was to launched the demo on January 30th,
Yeah.
which is like, okay. But yeah, I mean, and to actually answer your question, I mean, the announcement was kind of a fake marketing beat for us. We were just like, oh, we're gonna do like an announcement trailer and try to get it
Mm,
on, IGN's like trailers YouTube channel where they just kind of put everything. And we put it on there, and it did really well,
mm,
which was really fun. That it um, kind of blew up. They ended up posting it on the IGN main channel.
mhm.
That kind of started us going. And then at the same time, I sent early access to the demo to like 300 streamers and YouTubers.
Right. Okay.
So people were starting to play it. We had some pretty big YouTube videos when the demo launched, which was really cool. Um, and then generally since then, to my dismay, it has been social media. It has been so much social media.
Hmm.
Like that's been the
Like that you
most,
guys have been doing to advertise the game, you mean?
for the most part. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, I just started being like, okay, I'm gonna because I just hate social media
Yeah.
platforms generally. But I was like, okay, I'm gonna bite the bullet, and I'm gonna start like making TikToks about the game or something. And they just were doing really well.
Hmm.
And then yeah, more recently we had a Twitter account called Indie Game Joe posted a video of the game, and it did really well on Twitter, and that gave us a bunch more wish lists, which yeah, so kind of all over the place, a number of different things at different times, but yeah.
So once the game started getting more and more attention, is that when you changed your mind about, okay, we have to go for it now? Because it sounded like before that you weren't even really thinking about marketing or how can we sell this game or make this into something that can make a profit.
Mhm.
Um, how did that transition happen then exactly?
Yeah, I mean, I think we were definitely trying to make it a commercial game before then. Um, like I think around when I was bringing Mason onto the project, which was like 6 months in, that was when I was starting to be
Okay.
like, okay, I'm going to take this more seriously. I'd seen, I had interest from friends, and I'd seen on those Reddit posts or whatever, like, oh, this could have legs to sell something. Um, I think the transition with the announcement and the demo and all of that was just like the expectations changed a lot. That like, I think before that we were very much like, oh, it would be really great if we can just put ourselves in a position for this to like make any money, basically. Like
Okay.
if this gives us, puts us in a position to like maybe make another small thing, that would be really
Mm.
nice. Like we were, I mean, before we announced, we were targeting 10,000 wish lists by the time we launched the game, and that happened pretty quickly,
Yeah.
which was really crazy. But yeah, so I think that was the biggest thing, was it just went from like, oh, maybe this could be like an indie release under our
Mhm.
belt that would be like, now we can point to like, oh, hey, we did a big thing,
Yeah.
to like, oh, this could be a pretty big opportunity for
Yeah.
us. Yeah.
Right. And then so when people started playing it and streamers were broadcasting it, um, were you watching them closely? And like if so, did people then respond to the same things that you thought were strongest?
At the start, I definitely was watching them closely. I mean, this is like the first time I've ever seen a streamer play a game I've made, I think. So like there was partially just the like excitement about that.
Mhm.
I think I don't know that anything at that point was super shocking, because like, I mean, we had we had play tested this demo so much. Like this is
Mhm.
this is one of the things that really got hammered into our heads at USC is like you just like you don't know what a game's going to do until you've play tested it like a billion
Yeah.
times. So I felt like I knew I had a pretty tight sense of the range of things that could happen in the demo. Um, so it was pretty expected for the most part. I do think, I mean, there's always certain things that like, I mean, after spending a year working on it,
Mm.
I'm not, just making it or looking at it, I'm not surprised watching the worm move around. So there's kind of always a moment for me of like when people start the game and they move the worm for the first time that like
Mhm.
they're like, "Oh wow, that's crazy." And I'm like, "Oh yeah, I forgot that that's actually like something that's
Yeah.
not like normal." Yeah.
I imagine you're getting a lot of feedback now from people that have played the demo. Um, are you actively listening to the feedback, or are you still just kind of doing your own thing and following your instincts?
Um I'm definitely listening to the feedback. I mean, to be honest, those two things aren't really in competition right now, which is really
Mm.
nice that for the most part, the feedback that we're getting is you should add more content, which is
Yeah.
like what, like, yeah, we're just making the whole game now.
Yeah.
So, so that's nice. I think I have had to learn to shut off certain things for sure. I think especially um, when the game made its way over to Twitter, and I found out uh, why Twitter is the way that it is in
Yeah.
terms of people are pretty mean over there. So I had
Yeah.
to figure
Yeah.
out how to be like, oh, this is the feedback that I'm not going to take
Yeah.
actually. Um, but yeah, I mean, for the most part, it's pretty aligned. I think, I mean, to the earlier points on ideas and what's funny and what's not funny, there's a lot of like listening to ideas and validating ideas as like, oh, I like this is funny, but also like I have a I have a 6-page list of ideas that would probably be funny if we had time to add them.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. So now that the demo is out in the open,
Mm.
um, how are you thinking about what still needs to be done for the full release that is coming later this year, I think?
Yep, planning on Q3, which is
Yeah.
coming up.
Yeah. It's gonna be here
Yeah.
sooner than you think, probably.
Yeah, no, it sure will. Yeah, I mean, specifically on that point, that is one thing I am learning with this project. I'm used to games in the past being like, you figure out when the game is going to release, and then you need to finish the game before the day that it releases, which is very different on this one because we're trying to give a version to content creators beforehand. And then we
Mhm.
have to do localization before that. We're going to need to test it a lot. And it's a bigger project, all of these things. So, you know, 4 months turns into 2 months, disappears really quickly. But yeah, I mean, honestly, right when we launched the demo and it was clear like the demo's okay, we don't need to like after I just fixed some bugs and it was in a stable place. Um, it was kind of like, okay, now we have to go like make the entire game. Like it was a little definitely a little scary. I put a lot of like kind of stub content in the demo that implies that we had made all of those things already. Like there's a bunch of stuff in the shop that just says like, oh, you could buy the webcam, but you can't buy it in the demo, which
Yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah.
we hadn't made that. We hadn't made like any of those things. So it was a lot of just like, okay, now we have to like fill in all of the content. Which since then we're in a good place. We've like hit alpha and started kind of play testing the full game start to finish with some friends, which is certainly a weight off of my shoulders.
Yeah, yeah.
I think, yeah, there's a level of anxiety about like, what if this game just does not work for as long as we need it to? But we're through that, and it's a lot more it's a lot more filling in gaps now, which is a lot more manageable to think about. Yeah.
Okay. So you have a pretty good idea now what the game needs to be, or are you maybe still figuring out some of the parts of the game, or is it just filling in, like adding more content, basically?
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, it's just adding in content. I mean, I think there are still individual pockets of the game that we're kind of figuring out, that
Mm,
I think um, we will probably be figuring out until we finish the game. There will always be pockets and stuff, but I think those over time, those have gotten a lot more constrained. That like, we're not opening up questions about like, oh, how does the time system work in the game?
mm.
Like, how do what's the core of the economy and things? Like, the questions we're answering are much more like, how do we get this one system to interact the way that we want it to? Like things like that.
Yeah, yeah. And like, do you feel more confident now, or are you just more aware of what you need to do, and is that making you nervous?
It depends on the day, for sure. I think there's there's a bit of a back and forth. Because I'm a bit of a crazy person with planning. So I've got a spreadsheet with like everything that needs to happen on the game, and with all these time estimates and how long we have and all of this, projections and stuff. And that can look pretty scary sometimes. I'll be honest. There's sometimes it makes me feel better because I feel in control of what's going on, and sometimes I look at it and it's just telling me like, "Hey, this is going to be hard to do all of this in time," and I'm like, "Okay." Um, so yeah, it definitely depends. I think generally, I would say I'm getting more confident over time rather
Mm,
than less. Just
yeah.
as things, because I think the thing that scares me the most is the parts of the game that are uncertain, because
Mm,
and that don't feel like we've play tested it, it's validated, I know it's good, like I can trust that this will be
yeah,
okay. When you have systems that are like, I think this is going to work, but people might play it and it might just not work. And we might just need to like spend a month changing it. Like that's the stuff that really scares me. So,
okay.
as we test more, and as those questions get smaller and smaller, I
Mm,
feel more like I can see what we're doing, and I feel more confident with it. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So just by doing a lot of play testing, you kind of figure out what needs to be what needs to be left alone and what needs to be refined, basically.
Yeah. I think that's the biggest thing. I mean, I again have gotten it hammered into my brain that like, you don't know anything about how a game plays until you watch people play
Mm,
it. And so yeah, I don't trust any of my systems until I see them. And
yeah,
then when I see them working, it's great, you know.
yeah,
But yeah, I have to actually play test it to get to that point.
yeah. I do have like questions about,
Mm.
because you said like you were maybe talking to publishers. As far as you can see on Steam, there's no publisher. Are you
Mhm.
still trying to get a publisher for the game, or have you made the decision to just make it all by yourself now?
Yeah, for the most part, we're in a place where we're just planning on doing it ourselves. I think especially when we, chose to not go with that specific publisher right before we announced, and then the announcement went really well. Like, we're especially in a place right now where we feel like we can do this ourselves, so we're not that interested in giving away the amount of
Mm,
revenue percentage
yeah.
that publishers tend to ask for. Um, so, but I mean, that being said, tends to go with this kind of stuff. Right when we said, okay, we're not going to have a publisher, was when the game started blowing up,
Yeah.
which was when publishers started reaching out to us.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
So I've we've been talking to publishers as well. I think I'm open to it to the extent that certain publishers have the ability to just bring a game to an audience that we just straight up don't
Mm,
have.
yeah.
There's some amount of that I could see being relevant, um, but for the most part, we've just decided. I mean, especially because like we don't we don't need development funding to finish this game, and I've heard a lot of advice from a lot of indie devs that is
Mm,
along the lines of like, if you don't need money, don't get a publisher. Like, it's just not gonna.
hmm.
It's like, if you don't need it, don't do it.
Yeah. 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 Because then I'm wondering, how are you sustaining yourself right now? Are you doing contract work still on the side to have an income?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a combination of things. It's contract work for one, doing the same stuff with Epic Games on the side, and then for two, I am living at home with my parents, keeping expenses low, and
Okay. Yeah.
that.
That's a good decision.
Yeah, I mean, I'm lucky enough to have a really good relationship with my parents, so it works for me. But you know, rent in rent in LA would make this quite a lot harder. So
Yeah.
I'm very grateful for that. Yeah.
Yeah, I always tell people stay with your parents for as long as you can. When you just, when you just graduated, like
Mm,
don't immediately try to support yourself. Like if you can save up for a couple of years or more, that's very valuable, especially
yeah.
right now, I think. Yeah.
No, yeah. I was just gonna say, especially right now, like it is so night and day of like, if I wasn't able um to to be here, then this game just couldn't get made. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And I am wondering now as well, are you already thinking about what's next after worming from home? Because when you were started talking about it, it's like a palate cleanser for you, and you have maybe more philosophical ideas about games, making games. So yeah, do you know already what you want to do next?
I have a lot of ideas for sure. I think it'll be hard to figure out over time where the artsy philosophical stuff fits in with having to make money on games. I think practically, um, Mason and I are hoping that this can be a springboard for us to
Mm.
start a I mean, he's working part-time on the project right now because he's also
Mm.
getting a master's degree.
Oh, okay,
So
he's still in
yeah,
school. Okay, okay.
yeah, which is separately unbelievable that he has the
Yeah,
time to. Yeah,
that's
I mean, he's
crazy.
like he's like actively working on his master's thesis while doing all of the art in this game. It's unbelievable. But yeah, he's so we're talking about, um that's the goal for us, is for this to put us in a position where we can both be full-time, kind of have our studio that would be both of us 50-50. We both like directing games as well. Like, I'm
Mm,
obviously directing this one. I worked on one of his games in college where he was the director on it. So we both work really well with each of us. And we're kind of thinking about just switching off because we both have things we want to make. I think it'll
mm,
be a good kind of flow back and forth for us. So I think in terms of the immediate future, if we are in a position where we can keep making things like this, it's going to be, I'm going to be, the design lead on his game, which I'm very
mm.
excited about.
Okay,
you
yeah,
know,
awesome.
yeah.
Okay, so you might start like a studio together, like an indie team together. That would be great. Yeah,
Yeah, that would be the intention. Would be
yeah.
would be very cool. And I will say with that as well, we've talked about it a fair bit, and it's not that different from what we would be doing right now. Like, we're not actually intending to like, expand a ton and like hire a bunch or whatever. Like we've like working together, and we're gonna keep it the two of us as long as we can
Yeah,
do
I
that
mean,
realistically.
look at teams like Team Cherry. I mean,
No,
they
exactly.
stay deliberately small because they like working as a small team. So that is always an option, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And it's one of the things I just know about myself too on projects that I've been more specialized. It's hard because I'm just antsy and I think I get bored easily and stuff. So it's really nice to be able to just like, if I don't want to be programming, I can go do audio. If I don't want to do audio, I can go do design stuff. Like I can just jump around.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, yeah, before we start wrapping up the podcast, I'd like to ask you some questions that might elicit like some advice or wisdom for other developers that might be listening right now. Because yeah, I think with this podcast, I just kind of want to, I guess, maybe highlight certain struggles that developers face and how people listening can then learn, okay, how to avoid those pitfalls.
Mm.
um so yeah, someone that might be listening right now that's very like early in their journey, what's one lesson you had to learn the hard way that might help them right now?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest ones that comes to mind is scoping games and
Mm,
the size of what people are making. That I think it's always an instinct, especially early on, to want to make something really big and to be very ambitious about that. And I think that's a really good thing, obviously, but I do think um, every game will take so much longer than you think it will take. And that is, yeah, certainly learned that the hard way. I mean, that's one reason why I think game jams are great, is because
mm,
it forces you to like iterate on your own processes a lot quicker. Whereas, because you get better every time you finish a game, and game jams make it so that you're just finishing games more
yeah,
than if your first game was to be a you know 3-year long RPG, whatever. Um, so I think, yeah, starting small and developing the bigger magnum opus ideas while just doing small things that are fun
mm,
and that teach you things. And yeah, I guess one thing I will add on to that as well, um, is to just not be afraid to make dumb things that are fun.
yeah,
I think I spent a lot of time blocking myself out of finishing things because I needed them to be like so like well thought out and good and cohesive and whatever. And the freedom that I'm experiencing by just being like, it's a funny game, it's a funny premise, I'm gonna make it and then I'll be done with it whenever. Um, it's it's a nice way to make games.
yeah, yeah. I think that might be the most interesting part of the development of working from home is that
Mm,
it really just started more like as a joke, as a palate cleanser, and you never thought it would get to this point. Because I think a lot of developers get stuck in that initial phase of what is the idea, what
mm.
can we do, how big can we make it. But you were just like, oh, I'm just gonna make something silly and we'll see.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, I think that's such a big part of it too. That I think is another lesson that took a while to learn, was that like I think it's so easy to look at finished games, like games that you're
Mhm.
playing, and kind of think through it backwards and be like, oh, I bet the developer just sat down and thought about it and then made the entire game. And it's like, that's not at all how it goes, that it's like, this game was so different
Mm,
when it started. And I think the only reason why it's getting made at all, for one, but also the only reason why it is the way that it is now, is because I spent a lot of time just like making something and then watching people play it and see
mm,
what was interesting, and then cut the things that I really liked that I think made the game worse, and just
Mm,
yeah, I think there's you have to be less precious about it and actually follow where the game is taking you, which I think is really takes a lot of practice
yeah,
to get used to
kill
that.
your
Yeah,
darlings.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And I think it's the way that you end up with something that you do actually love at the end, because you
Yeah.
could be in love with an idea. I've had a lot of games where I'm in love with an idea to the point where I won't budge on it, and then it
Mm,
makes it so that I love the actual game less when it's finished, because it doesn't work how
mm,
I think it should in my head.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. What is a skill that matters more than people realize in terms
Hmm.
of, game development?
I think. I mean, I think one simple answer with that is the ability to collaborate and work with others.
Mm,
I do think that is, especially in indie spaces, that can be undersold as like. I think it's easy for people to, you know, look at solo devs and think that there's a path where you can lock yourself in your room and never talk to anybody and then come out with a game. And I think it's possible. I mean, as somebody who, I'm good at some things, I'm not good at other things. Like, the ability to work with other people has let anything I've ever made have any chance of being decent, because I can let other people do things that they're good at,
mm,
which yeah, obviously is huge. So, and then at the end of the day too, like, you're in a certain way collaborating with your players and with playtesters, and I think that's where a lot of games go wrong. I mean, on the same point of just being flexible and seeing where a game is leading you, like, you are collaborating with your players. You're seeing what they
mm,
think about it. You're getting their feedback. You're taking their ideas and deciding what to do with them. So I do think at its core that is a a really important skill to have. I think another just more specific one, I would say, this is kind of on the topic of scoping and stuff, but um, building the ability to anticipate how long things will take
mhm,
is extremely important, I think. And takes a lot of time and takes a lot of making games, and I am still very wrong
mm,
most of the time. But I think I'm at the point where I can like get in a ballpark, which again, this game would not be possible if I wasn't able to look some amount into the future and say, I think that we can do this amount of work in this amount of time.
yeah.
So I think, yeah, the ability to like plan things and realistically make estimates is pretty huge.
Mm. Is there something that you think that people misunderstand most about what it's like becoming a game developer?
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things, especially because in school, um, a lot of people were very indie and very like, at least a lot of the people I was friends with had a lot of artistic ideas about games,
Mm,
um and I think that is really good and really important. And I think it's easy for a lot of people to think um that there's no overlap between making a commercial game and making like a good expressive artistic game. um like, I think there's a lot of, you look around online at people talking about indie games, and there's a lot of
mm,
people saying, oh, I don't want to just make whatever trend is going on right now
yeah.
or whatever. Which I totally respect. And to be clear, like, I'm not saying anybody should go make any specific type of game. I think it can just be relevant to explore, like, for Mason and I, we've talked about this a lot, that like the Venn diagram between like, games that have potential to actually sell copies and like games that we're interested in making, like there's a lot of overlap there,
Mm.
you know? And I think when we're trying to make this into something sustainable, like I don't, I personally just don't see the whole like we're aware of how the games we're making are going to do commercially. Like that's not the kind of like selling out that I think it's often talked about as, because I'm
Mm.
like, I'm also making a game that I really want to make, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
I'm just picking, there's a lot of different games that I want to make. That yeah, that's just to say um I think there's a lot of room for those things to overlap. I guess
Yeah.
that's yeah.
Well, Zach, thank you so much for coming on to the podcast and talking about, well, yeah, basically your whole journey as a game developer and talking about working from home. Very excited for the full release.
Thank you. Me too.
Yeah. I'm hoping we can maybe do this again someday. Maybe once Worming from Home has already been released. I'd love to talk to you about that and what that process was like for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I can
So
come back and change all of my advice based on what actually
yeah.
happened.
Okay. Yeah. No, that sounds great, man. Awesome.
Cool.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you everyone for listening, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.